Okay, how is everybody? Welcome to Kit's Rock Review. It's been a while. I know that I intended to do a lot more rock reviews this summer than I've actually done. But part of it is I went on a little trip to Maine for a couple weeks, and I had intended to do some rock reviews from Maine, but I found the hotel that I'm staying at didn't have enough internet power to let me upload anything. So I had to wait a while. But I'm going to show you some pictures that I took while I was in Maine and talk about the rock songs that they reminded me of. My younger brother, his name's Adam, he seems to think I have this disease called music Tourette's, because someone will say a phrase and it'll remind me of a song, and of course I'll have to remind everybody of that. I guess I also have sort of a music picture Tourette's, where I see a picture and it reminds me of a song, and I'll have to let everybody know. So this is me seeing all these pictures that I took in Maine reminding me of songs. So I'm going to show you these pictures and tell you what songs they remind me of, and then tell you a little bit about those songs. Okay? But before we get into that, if you're watching on Facebook, please like and follow. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And so let's get started, okay? So got to figure out how to share my screen here. Actually, I know how to do it. And we'll get started. Okay, so here we go. So, that's a sign at one of the rest stops. Welcome to Maine, right across the border from New Hampshire. So pictures from my vacation that remind me of rock songs. So let's get started here. So right now I got a blank white screen, right? Here's the first picture I got. This is a dock on Deer Island, which is about an hour and a half from where I was staying on Mount Desert Island. This is the dock on the very southern end of the island. And what do you think it reminded me of? But, a little song by Otis Redding called Sitting on the Dock of a Bay. So and by the way, there's Otis Redding, if you didn't know what he looked like. He was a rhythm and blues guy, but this song had some more of a folk rockish feel to it. So he began writing this song in 1967, just after his performance at the Monterey Pop Festival. And he finished it a few months later with producer and guitarist Steve Cropper. And he eventually recorded it with Steve Cropper's band, which is, by the way, Booker T and the MGs. So when you listen to Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, you're actually listening to Otis Redding being backed by Booker T and the MGs. Unfortunately, Otis Redding died in a plane crash just after 3 days after recording it. But the song went on to become the #1 single. And it was the first #1 single of an artist released after their death. But, I don't want to bring you down. But, I saw the song, sitting on the dock of a bay, wasting time. I can just imagine myself, there's this little person here on the dock of the bay sitting there watching the ocean. And when I see docks, especially docks on the ocean like that, watch the tide roll in, it just reminds me, watching nature, enjoying nature, and everything like that. Okay. The next picture I took is this one. This is actually on Mount Desert Island where I was staying. And it's actually in Bar Harbor, which is one of the villages on Mount Desert Island. And at low tide, there's a bar which connects Bar Harbor to a place called Bar Island. But it's only, an hour and a half before low tide, an hour and a half after low tide, it's visible. And then if you get stranded on that island, you're there for 6 hours waiting for the tide to go out. But when I saw this picture, you can see there's people there. And, I actually went pretty far out. And these people, as I was taking this picture, they actually had to take off their shoes and wade back through the bar as the tide was coming in. It was only about up to their ankles. It wasn't that deep. But if they had waited a few more minutes, they probably wouldn't have been able to get back. But anyway, seeing that song, seeing that picture, that reminded me of Walk on the Ocean by Toad the Wet Sprocket from their album, their second album, Fear. There's the cover of what Fear looks like. And the song Walk on the Ocean, I was in college when it came out. And the Toad the Wet Sprocket, by the way, for those that didn't know, Toad the Wet Sprocket, it's an unusual name for a band. They actually got it from a Monty Python skit. where it was a fictitious rock report. And they mentioned one of the bands was Toad the Wet Sprocket. And when the real Toad the Wet Sprocket formed, they were looking for a name and they couldn't think of anything. So they just took it off a Monty Python skit. Anyway, the song came about because the Toad the Wet Sprocket lead singer's name was Glenn Phillips. Name is Glenn Phillips. He wrote the song. His wife and he were out at the ocean in Washington State. And he wrote down a bunch of lyrics, had this melody. And he originally just put the lyrics down as a placeholder. He couldn't think of anything to replace it with, the lyrics. So he eventually said, this is a quote, "I tried rewriting it, the lyrics, and nothing ever really worked. I tried to make the chorus more meaningful and said, well, it sounds like I know when I'm talking about something. And it's a great song, even if it was just the lyrics were initially placeholder. They do have meaning, walk on the ocean, step on the stone, flesh becomes water, blood becomes bone. It's still a good song, even if he doesn't quite know what the lyrics were when he wrote them. Okay, the next picture here. This is still on Mount Desert Island. There's the northern peninsula, I guess, the little point on Mount Desert Island is called Hadley Point. And this is actually a picture of the sunset the first night I was there at Hadley Point. And you're looking from Hadley Point on Mount Desert Island to mainland Maine. But even though this is a sunset, it reminds me of the song Heart of the Sunrise from Yes. And that song comes from their 1971 album Fragile. So the song is as old as I am. And Fragile is the first Yes album to feature Rick Wakeman. And the original Tony Kaye, he would just use Hammond organs and an electric keyboard. And the reason they got Rick Wakeman is he began to use like a Mellotron and a Moog synthesizer. This song, Heart of the Sunrise, never was released as a single. Probably because it's 11 minutes long, and radio stations, if you have anything over 3 minutes, they don't like it. But the song itself is about a man lost in the city, and he's using the sunrise, to find his way home. And later, singer John Anderson would say it's actually a metaphor about finding one's way in life using nature. So, and plus, it's just a pretty picture of a sunset here anyway, and the sunrise is also equally as good. But I'm not a morning person, so me seeing the sunrise is usually not what's going to happen. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Okay, this picture here was taken at the Scoodic Peninsula, which is part of Acadia National Park, and most of Acadia National Park is on Mount Desert Island. But there's a little peninsula on mainland Maine called Scoodic Point, which is part of Acadia National Park. And it's hard to see, but these are the waves coming in, splashing against the rocks. The tide was coming in. As you can see, there are a few little ducks on the water there. And it just reminded me, seeing the ducks rocking on the water, reminded me of Jackson Browne's Rock Me on the Water, which is from his first solo album. And it was actually the second single he released. And it only made it to number 50. But, you can hear that song on classic rock radio all the time. And the other day I heard it on yacht rock radio on Sirius XM. So, it's still a well-known song. Here, let me see. Rock Me on the Water, Jackson Browne. That's his debut solo album, which is technically called Jackson Browne, but because it has that saturate before using above it, some people think that's the title. Anyway, the song, by the way, the background vocals in Rock Me on the Water are by David Crosby, if you didn't know. And according to what I read, Jackson Browne said that song is waiting for others to make changes in the world when you should be making those changes yourself. So just look at the first line of the song. Oh, people, look around. The signs are everywhere. You've left it for somebody other than you to be the one to care. So basically Jackson Browne saying everybody should care about the world, what's going on, and not enough people are to make these changes. But I just looking at this, seeing the ducks rocking on the water, they're not doing anything. They're just sitting there rocking on the water when they should be caring about what's going on, I guess. So that's what that picture reminded me of. Okay, and speaking of waves, this next picture is of some more waves here crashing into on Mount Desert Island, crashing into some of the this actually might be at Scoodic Point too. But here's just the waves crashing into the rocks. And it reminded me of the song Amongst the Waves by Pearl Jam. So there is Pearl Jam in the early 2010s on stage. The song Amongst the Waves comes from the 2009 album Backspacer, which is the first album in a long time that they worked with Brendan O'Brien as their producer. He actually did like the first couple albums up through Yield as their producer. And they decided they wanted to work with him again. He had been working with Bruce Springsteen, and initially when they worked with him, he'd make suggestions like, "Oh, great song, but speed it up, slow it down, or maybe you want to change the key you're singing it or writing it in." And they initially, like when they first worked with him, they didn't follow the suggestions. But then they heard Bruce Springsteen was working with him, making suggestions like that. And they're like, well, if his suggestions are good enough for Bruce Springsteen, they're good enough for Pearl Jam. But anyway, Amongst the Wave, the music was written by Stone Gossard, and then Eddie Vedder. He wrote the lyrics. And for those of you that don't know, Eddie Vedder's from Southern California, and he's a surfer, even though the band is now based in Seattle. And I saw one critic said the song is about surfing is a metaphor for life. But you know what? I think it's more about just surfing being a metaphor for life. I think it's about survival and sharing your life with someone. Lyrics are about two people surfing, not just one. So it's about living life with other people, working together. A lot of people say that Backspacer, by the way, has more positive lyrics than a lot of other Pearl Jam albums, and I can see that. Probably if this had been recorded for 10, it would probably have been, this depressing grunge sounding song, but it's very an uplifting, life is great type of song. Okay, we're still talking about the sea because I was in Maine on the coast. So next, I was on this little boat tour going around Mount Desert Island, and they pointed this house out to me, and I took a picture. This house is actually the Rockefeller Residence. It was the home of David Rockefeller. It was where Nelson Rockefeller, who was a former vice president of the United States, was born there. But what song did I think about? I saw this, a home right by the ocean. So I thought about Home by the Sea, Second Home by the Sea from Genesis. For those that don't know, this comes from Genesis's 1983 self-titled album. A lot of people call that album Shapes or the Mama album. Mama's the first song on it. Shapes is the cover. Looks like that. That's why they call it the Shapes album. And the reason Genesis called this album Genesis is because it's the first time that the trio version of the lineup sat down and wrote all the songs together. Back when they were a 5-piece, they would write songs together as a group all the time. But this is the first time when they were a trio that they literally wrote all the songs of the album together. So the song itself, lyrically, it's about a burglar who breaks into a house only to find that house haunted. And then he's forced to listen to the ghosts tell their stories of their lives. But to me, that's not the best part of the song. The best part of the song is the instrumental passage that happens in the middle of it. In order to hear that instrumental passage, you need to hear the whole Home by the Sea, Second Home by the Sea. A lot of people consider Home by the Sea one song and Second Home by the Sea another song, especially radio stations. A lot of radio stations only play the first part, Home by the Sea, and then cut it off right in the middle of the instrumental section. And if they're doing that, they're wrong. If you hear a radio station play just Home by the Sea without Second Home by the Sea, you need to call that radio station and tell them it's all one long song. They need to play the whole thing. I love the instrumental part. It begins with this electronic drum solo by Phil Collins. And there's this, I call it a screeching guitar solo. I don't know if that's the right term for it, by Rutherford. And then you have this sort of haunting keyboard solo by Banks, and it all works together. It makes the song great. So if you're listening to a terrestrial radio station and they only play one part of the song, as I said, call them, write them, tell them they got to change their playlist because they're not doing it right. Okay, so we're still by the sea, and now on Mount Desert Island, there's only one beach. There's a lot of beaches, but there's only one with sand on it, and they call it Sand Beach. The day I went to it, it was raining, and actually I preferred going there because there weren't as many people. But Sand Beach, the waves were coming in, crashing in. And so this reminded me of the song The Sea and the Sand. That's what hit my head when I saw this. Down by the Sea and the Sand. And that comes from Quadrophenia, their 1973 rock opera. And for those of you that don't know the story of Quadrophenia, the rock opera is about a young mod named Jimmy and the events of his life in the summer of 1965. If you don't know what a mod was a British subculture in the 50s and 60s. And to distinguish them, they had tailor-made suits. They had motor scooters. A lot of them went to all-night dancing parties. They liked groups like The Who and the Small Faces. They also had a perceived rivalry with the Rockers, and the Rockers are, the leather jacket motorcycle riding people, whereas the Mods rode motor scooters. So they had that perceived rivalry. And in Quadrophenia, there's a riot between the Mods and the Rockers in Brighton, where Jimmy spent some time. And they also, there's the symbol for the Who, and that symbol for the Who, by the way, the blue, white, and red is an aerial British Air Force symbol that the Mods incorporated as their symbol, and the Who also used it as theirs. But anyway, in the song, Jimmy is at the sea remembering what's going on in his life, and he preferred the summer as opposed to what's happening back home. Now, I like the song, I like the album, but I wasn't involved in any riots in Maine, but I can't help but reminisce when I'm out by the beach watching the waves hit. Just like that. Okay, next one. We're getting near the end here. So on my little boat tour, we went to a place called Little Cranberry Island, and Little Cranberry Island is not connected. Mount Desert Island itself is connected to the mainland by a bridge. Little Cranberry Island is not. You have to take a boat and a ferry to get there. A lot of people ride by, believe it or not, the mail boat. But I saw this in the Little Cranberry Harbor were these lobster fishermen. And most of the people that live in Little Cranberry Island are lobster fishermen. There's one boat said Tigger on it, so I had to take a picture of that said Tigger on the lobster boat. But anyway, it reminded me of the song Down Easter Alexa by Billy Joel, which is from the Stormfront album. Here's Billy Joel playing the song. That song is about a impoverished Long Island fisherman finding it increasingly hard to make a living. That's the story today of lobster and fishermen in Maine, is they find it increasingly hard to make a living off lobster and fish. A lot of the lobster and the cold water fish that used to be in down East Maine are moving north because the waters are heating up, and they don't like the hot waters. They want the cold waters that are north. So there's getting less and less lobster and fish for those lobster and fishermen to fish. So as I said, even though the Billy Joel song is about Long Island, it's also the story of Maine fishermen and lobstermen. Musically, the song reminds me of fishing and stuff. It's got that accordion and the sea shanties that people used to sing had accordions. It's got some drum sounds on it that remind me of the sea. And there's these, what I call guitar screams that sound like ocean sea life. All that picture reminded me of Down Easter Alexa by Billy Joel. It's my favorite song from the Stormfront album, by the way. Okay. Next, another village on Mount Desert Island is called Northeast Harbor. And there are a couple like gardens that people maintain and are open to the public. And this is one of the gardens. So, how I thought In the Garden by Double Trouble with Susan Tedeschi came to mind. When I wake up in the garden, peaceful slumber fills my eyes. So that's the album cover. You can see Susan Tedeschi on the left-hand corner. So for those of you that don't know, Double Trouble was the backing band for Stevie Ray Vaughan. He died in 1990 in a helicopter crash. And after that, members of Double Trouble, especially Chris Layton and Tommy Shannon, went on to work as session musicians. They also formed two other bands, Archangels and Storyville. But in the early 2000s, Chris Layton, the drummer, Tommy Shannon, the bass player, decided to revive the Double Trouble name, and they released a new album called Been a Long Time. But obviously, they didn't have Stevie Ray Vaughan to play guitar or sing, so they got guest guitarists and singers, and one of those was the young Susan Tedeschi. She sang Rock and Roll, the Led Zeppelin song they did. But she also wrote the song In the Garden with Tommy Shannon. It's about being at peace in nature, like a lot of this stuff is. Okay, so here's our final song that I'm going to talk about. A little sailing ship. That's the Margaret Todd. A lot of tourists go on it and sail around Frenchman Bay, and with full sails opening. And it reminded me of the song The Southern Cross by Crosby, Stills, and Nash. So there's the cover of the Southern Cross single. This came from their 1982 album called Daylight Again. And believe it or not only are backing vocals by Crosby, Stills, and Nash on that, with lead vocals were by Stephen Stills, but also Timothy B. Schmidt and Art Garfunkel provide backing vocals. That would have been an interesting band, wouldn't it? If Art Garfunkel and Timothy B. Schmidt of the Eagles had joined Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Anyway, the song is based on another song called 7 League Boots. And Stephen Stills rewrote the lyrics and the chorus to this. And this is what he said. This is what, when the CSN had their box set in 1991, this is what he wrote about it. He said, the Curtis brothers brought us a wonderful song, but it drifted too much. I rewrote a new set of words and added a different chorus. It's about the power of the universe to heal your wounds. And in the video for the song, which was in heavy rotation on MTV in the early 80s, you see Stephen Stills sailing on a ship just like that. So, you know, I thought whenever I saw a ship like that, I think of this song. You know, and everyone, I think, if you've ever been to Maine like I have, you use nature. I use nature. I can't sail a ship, but everyone uses nature and the Southern Cross to heal your wounds. And the lyric of the song is, she's all that I have left and music is her name, and music being the name of Stephen Stills' ship in that song. But music is also another thing that I use to heal myself and get refreshed. Okay, so what did you guys think? Let me know. I got to end my presentation here. There we go. So what did you think of my pictures? What do you think of the songs that I associate with them? Let me know in the comments. And also let me know if those pictures remind you of any other songs that I didn't think about. And here's another thing in the comments. Why don't you tell me what you guys were doing on your vacation while I was gone? So until next time, everyone, keep on rocking in the free world, and I'll see you later.